to fear is
In war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
Well, welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. It's Thursday, so we're doing Foundations of Freedom here on Thursday, which if you would like to get some more of that all throughout last year, we did it. You can go to our archives at wallbuilderslive.com and click on those archives and scroll through and look for Foundations of Freedom Thursdays. We hit all kinds of topics from everything in the Constitution. People had questions about the Declaration or basic principles even before the founding of America that America was based upon. So lots of great information and education there. And today we're going to do the same thing. We're going to, I guess, David, today we'll kind of let our topics be guided by some of the questions we've been getting in recently.
We've really enjoyed this throughout the last 2 years that we've been doing this. It's been really popular, and based on the number of questions we get, it's still real popular. So it's going to be a lot of fun to go through these because they do, and that's what we do on Thursday, is deal with constitutional issues or issues related to the Constitution that have practical application, and look at how we can answer some of that constitutionally, legally, historically, etc.
All right, well, our first one's going to come from Florida. This is from Jonathan. He says, "I've recently come across the Informed Voters Project. It's a it's a website about voting and has some videos on it." And he quotes from the video, and it's all about the court claiming that they're the only fair branch, basically. Here's some of the quotes from it. "A branch whose one and only job is to decide what's fair. Judges who stand for one thing and only one thing, fairness. Our courts are the great levelers, one branch of government devoted to fairness, a third branch of government equal to the others. Even-handed judges committed to doing justice for all, impartial judges who stand outside of politics and partisanship, free from the influence of special interest or particular groups or causes." Oh, wow, the mighty court. David, Jonathan asks, what are your responses to these statements?
I haven't seen propaganda this good since I was studying some of the stuff in history related to World War II. I mean, this is great propaganda. And if we believe it, we're in serious trouble. The courts have nothing to do with fairness. And the reason is you should hate fairness every opportunity you can. You should love justice. You should love the rule of law. You should love equality, but you should hate fairness because fairness is ambiguous and undefined. If you ask a 5-year-old what's fair, he will not tell you the same thing a 65-year-old will. If you ask a rich person what's fair, they will not tell you the same thing a poor person will. If you ask a heavy Democrat what's fair, they will not tell you the same thing a heavy Republican will tell you what's fair. That is subjective. And for a court to get into deciding what's fair, that puts the judge in the mode of, well, my opinion is this is fair, and so, I'm a liberal Democrat, progressive, and you're a Tea Party conservative, and I just don't think it's fair that you have the same voice. So you don't want that. I mean, to have a branch dedicated to fairness, that is absolutely violative of everything in the Constitution. The Constitution sets up the courts to go by the rule of law. As John Adams said, we're a government of laws, not of men. What this does to have fairness is turns the judiciary into the government of men, not of laws. So the courts exist to enforce justice as set forth in the rule of law enacted through constitutional process as specified by the Constitution. I love our friend Rabbi Lapin. And Rabbi Lapin has said, the first time God spoke to people, he spoke in Hebrew. That is the language God chose to reveal himself to his chosen people in. Hebrew is an important language to God. And he said you can tell a lot by what's in Hebrew. For example, the word coincidence does not appear in Hebrew. You cannot say that word. And it's because it never crossed God's mind that something was a coincidence. He orchestrates things. His divine providence puts things together. But Rabbi Lapin points out another word that does not exist in Hebrew is the word fair. God is not into what's fair. He's into what's just. He's into what's right. What's fair is irrelevant. So to have this propaganda out there that the court is devoted to what's fair, man, that makes it all about subjective feelings, and it's going to change from day to day. It's going to change from plaintiff to defendant. It's going to change you do not want a country that's run by fairness. You want a country that's run by justice.
Yeah, I think this is a good lesson for our kids, man. It's not, how many times we heard it's not fair, it's not fair. You want what's just, not what's fair.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things that I did with my kids is I would not let them use the word fair. And I explained it to them several times. They probably got tired of hearing it, but God He's not into what's fair. What happened to Jesus was not fair, but it was good for everybody what happened. That's how we get salvation. What happened to Joseph wasn't fair. Accused wrongly of a crime, accused of several things he did not do, but it worked out to save Israel. What happened to Job wasn't fair, but it worked out that he got twice as much as the end. God is into justice. He will make sure that the right result happens, but what goes on along the way is not fair. So God's not looking for what's fair, but He is looking for how you respond to what happens to you, how Jesus responded to the cross, how Joseph responded to unjust imprisonment, how Job responded to all the calamities that beset him when he had done nothing wrong. That's what God was looking for, was the right response. So I told my kids, you do not use the word fair. Fairness has nothing to do with anything else at all. What you want is justice, and what God wants is the right response from you. You just respond and do what's right. God will take care of the rest.
All right, Dave, I know we're supposed to be going to break right now, but just real quick, a couple of words from you on the last part of that one, where it said, even-handed judges, impartial judges who stand outside of politics and partisanship, free from the influence of special interest or particular. Does that exist? I mean, do we really have people?
It didn't exist 200 years ago, which is why Jefferson said, our judges are not more honest than other people. They're like other people. He said they have the same proclivities to party, the same proclivities to the other, and he went through and listed them. And it's human nature. Unless you're saying judges are not part of human nature, and they don't have human nature, and they're above human nature, which we know is ridiculous, which is why this is a great propaganda piece. You listen to it and you say, oh, that really sounds nice. Well, it may really sound nice, just like patting a rattlesnake may really sound nice, but it doesn't work. It will not work out. And the other thing is, notice that they insert in there the propaganda that they're one of the three equal branches of government. Founding fathers would have gone through the roof on that part particularly, because in the Federalist Papers, they made it real clear there are not three equal branches of government. They said specifically that the legislative branch predominates, and they said the judicial branch is the weakest beyond comparison of the three branches. It's so weak that the liberty of the people can never be endangered from that branch. They were not into three co-equal branches. The judicial branch was unelected and unaccountable to the people. Therefore, they specifically gave it the least power, the least authority. It is not a co-equal branch. The legislative is the one closest to the people. It's the one that has elections every 2 years. Therefore, it has the most authority because the people can get it at the quickest. So that's another piece of propaganda they have in there. It's all made up. And well, I'm sure they firmly believe it, because progressives and liberals tend to believe in the innate goodness of man. It just never works out. I mean, history just does not show the innate goodness of man. It shows that it takes outside restraints to control them, whether it be the restraint of religion or law or something. You don't do it just because I'm a nice guy on the inside. If I'm nice to somebody, if I don't rob them, for me, it's because I fear God. I don't rob the corner 7-Eleven. I don't go into Walmart and shoot people because I know I'm going to answer to God. That's a good restraint on my behavior. For other people, it might be that I don't want to do 50 years in jail for robbing somebody or beating them up. So there's got to be some kind of restraint to control our human behavior, and that's what the Founding Fathers understood, and that's what progressives tend not to understand. They think that man will always do the right thing, that he is innately good, and history just does not prove that, not even one time.
Got to take a break. Jonathan from Florida, thank you for the great questions, and if you want more information on this subject, David has a great CD on the myths of the judiciary. You can learn more there at WallBuilders.com, and also in Constitutional Live, we go into those myths of the judiciary and talk about the different roles of the branches. We've got another question coming up from David Mullen, so stay with us, folks. We'll be back in a moment with your questions here on WallBuilders Live.
Samuel Adams said, "The liberties of our country and the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending against all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In the case Lee versus Wiseman, the Supreme Court ruled that for an adult to mention the word God at a public graduation constituted both psychological and religious coercion against the students. Yet consider the actions of William Samuel Johnson, a signer of the Constitution and one of America's leading educators who served as the first president of Columbia College. At his graduation exercises, William Samuel Johnson declared to the students, "You this day have received a public education, the purpose whereof hath been to qualify you better to serve your Creator and your country. Your first great duties, you are sensible, are those you owe to heaven, to your Creator and Redeemer." Founding Father William Samuel Johnson believed that a public graduation was an appropriate setting to remind students of the duties which they owed God.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
George Washington. The Constitution approaches nearer to perfection than any other government hitherto instituted among men.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. You found us on Thursday, and on Thursdays we do Foundations of Freedom Thursday. And today we're actually getting to several of your questions. We encourage you to send those in. radio@wallbuilders.com is the email. You might have some questions about the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, the Declaration, or maybe even just some of the cultural issues going on today. Our goal is to approach all of those issues from a biblical and a historical point of view. So send those in, and we will get to them when we can. We've got another one today this one's from David Mullen, and he says, how did it become so set into black cultural thinking that the Republicans became Democrats opposing civil rights, and the Democrats became Republicans standing up for civil rights in the 60s? I think that's backwards, though, right, David? I mean, the perspective today is that
that's what he's saying. The Republicans, because it was the Democrats who opposed civil rights originally, but now everybody thinks the Republicans did that. In the 60s, they switched that over. And so it was the Republicans standing up for civil rights back when this all happened in the 1860s, but now everybody thinks it was the Democrats who stood up for civil rights. So he's talking about that in the 60s, it got completely flipped, where the Dems became Republicans, Republicans became Dems.
So is that what happened? I mean, did the parties actually switch, or did we just have a really good marketing job by one of the parties to change the perception?
No, this is all about education. Let me take you back. You remember when Mel Gibson did the movie The Passion of the Christ?
Sure.
And you remember the criticism that raged around that, and there was all this clamor that, oh my gosh, this is going to lead to anti-Semitism. There's going to be Jews because it shows Jews killing Jesus. The clamor on the outside was, say the Romans did it. Don't say Jews, because you'll have this rise in anti-Semitism because all the Romans are dead, so who cares about the Romans? We can't say the Jews killed Jesus. And it turned out that anti-Semitism went down after the movie came out. Nobody could explain it. They said, well, that wasn't what we thought was going to happen. But there was all this pressure to don't say what happened historically because that could be offensive to Jews. Well, let's say the Romans did it. Well, no, you tell history the way it happened. And so you have that aspect, and now it's in the politically correct stuff on Islam. I mean, under Common Core, that one book I love to point out of Florida, that the book they have that has 63 pages and 3 chapters in world history deals with Islam and knowing the 5 pillars of Islam, and there's nothing similar at all in Christianity or Judaism, and it becomes really clear that it was Islam that saved the world from those terrible Jews and Christians, and that's not the way history was. But if we say the way history was, and that terrorism came from Islam, not from Judaism and Christianity, and now Christianity had its problems with Inquisition, etc., but not after the Reformation, last 500 years, who's the terrorist? It's not Jews and Christians, it's Islam. But we can't say that because that might be offensive, and by the way, they yell really loud when we say that. So rather than offend the minority, we don't say anything. Well, we have the same thing now. What if in the history book that we wrote for Reconstruction era, what if in there we included the statement that the Ku Klux Klan was started by the Democrats in 1866 and 1867, and that they openly testified that in hearings before Congress in 1875, on hearings on Klan violence, the Democrats openly admitted that was their group that was doing that. And what if we showed that there in Reconstruction, the first 23 civil rights laws were passed by Republicans, nearly most with 100% opposition of Democrats and 80 to 85% of Republicans. What if we were to show that Democrats fought every civil right? What if we showed that not a single Democrat voted to end slavery when we came on the 13th Amendment? What if we showed that none of them voted for the 14th Amendment to give civil rights to blacks? What if we showed that the first 41 blacks elected in Texas were all Republican? The first 137 blacks elected in Louisiana were all Republican. What if we showed the first 99 blacks elected in Alabama and the first 112 in Mississippi?
Well, I can tell you, first thing is people are going to be shocked.
Well, they're going to be shocked.
Because they don't know it.
But do you think the Democrats might be mad and outraged and show up at school board meetings and protest what's in the textbooks?
Yes.
So
yes.
What happens is we don't do that. And so rather than tell the story of what happened, we let urban myth go that, oh, no, well, yeah, Democrats used to be really bad, but now it's the Republicans that are the Democrats. And nobody rebutted that. And we wouldn't put that in our history textbooks. We just said blacks suffered severe persecution in the 1860s, but we don't point out that it was from Democrats, not Republicans. And so it really is an education problem. And this is the problem we have with being politically correct, is all sorts of groups get different treatment at different times. And rather than just saying the good, the bad, and by the way, if you're going to say the good, the bad, the ugly, not only do you say that the Democrats were really terrible on civil rights, and they're the ones who started the Klan, you also point out that in the election between FDR and Hoover, and by the way, when Hoover got elected before FDR, he got elected on the back of black votes. I mean, at the time that Hoover ran against FDR, he got 77% of the black vote. The Republican presidential candidate did. But the problem was when he got elected and got in office, he broke his promises to blacks. Civil rights leaders like Robert Russa Mouton, who was the direct disciple of Booker T. Washington, made all sorts of promises what he was going to do in the black community, didn't do any of them. So there's a Republican who broke his word. He used blacks to get elected and then did nothing for them once he got in office.
Wait a minute. I'm thinking of a current president that made all kinds of promises to the black community and hadn't done any of them.
Have you seen that in any textbook recently?
Not once, and not one news story about it. I mean,
welcome to modern history.
Yeah.
We move history into agendas rather than telling what happened. And you should tell the good, the bad, the ugly. So the answer to David's question is the reason we don't hear about it is we don't tell history because we're afraid of offending someone. And in the 60s, it was called the solid Democrat South. If anybody remembers that, every southern state was solidly Democrat, and that was what the Democrats counted on for every presidential election, not the New England areas. They counted on the solid Democrat South, and there's no way the Democrat legislators and Democrat state boards of education and everything else is going to let textbooks come out with they're the ones who started the Klan. They're the ones who violated all the civil rights. They're the ones who did the black codes, the 11 different laws that you had to violate. They're not going to have that. So that's what happens when you let history become something political rather than simply telling the good, the bad, the ugly.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, David. We need to get that news out there. People got to know the truth about that. And folks who want to know more about that, please visit the website at wallbuilders.com. Read some of the articles David's written on this issue. Check out that incredible DVD on American history in black and white, Setting the Record Straight. The stories in there are just phenomenal. David, just a week or so ago, we were the family and I were in Birmingham filming for the TV project we're doing, and we went through the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and there is so much there that people just, especially these young people, they have no idea how bad those Democrat Jim Crow laws were, and how evil it was, and how black people were treated by the Democrat Party. It is outrageous, and you got generations now that have been lied to about who is actually doing it. Those that actually know anything about it, but most of them just don't even know that it happened. So there's a lot of truth here that needs to come out. Great resources there at wallbuilders.com. Encourage you folks to go there to find out more. Got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Welcome back, folks. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. We got one more segment here. That means one more question. This one comes out of Idaho today. It's from Brenton, and he says, "I listened to your recent podcast discussing the Supreme Court decision with the monks and the caskets." David, that's been, I guess, a month or so now. You might remind us a little bit about the case itself. But he also says, I'm reading Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments book. In the Supreme Court case, the monks sued under their right to earn a living. In Levin's book, he brings up FDR's second Bill of Rights, wherein one of the amendments is basically the right to a job that pays a livable wage. What's the difference? I'm not a fan of FDR's second Bill of Rights, but it seems that FDR was trying to pass legislation that is similar to what the monks essentially won a Supreme Court battle on. There has to be some critical differences here. I just don't know what the key argument is that separates the two. What's the pivotal factor that makes the monks' case a positive victory for limited government and FDR's amendment attempt just another bureaucratic power grab? Is it just the fact that the right to do something doesn't mean that there has to be a law about it too? Thanks, Brenton. All right, great question, David. So the case, first of all, the case on the monks, remind us what that one was.
As I recall, it came out of Louisiana, and there you had monks that were making caskets. That was the way that they made their income. That was their living. And the state said, no, you're supposed to be regulated. We regulate casket makers. That's really a safety hazard. If you get a bad casket and it goes underground in 20 years, it opens up rather than 30. I'm sorry, sarcasm there. But we've talked before about how the state wants to over-regulate everything. It allows them to collect fees. And in this case, they were trying to shut down the monks from making these caskets because they said that's a regulated industry for us, as clipping your nails are, as, we've talked cosmetology and all these other things. So
I'm trying to think of an industry that's not regulated now. It's so crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that was the question. Now, the difference, and the question that Brendan asked here is a good one, because in FDR's second Bill of Rights, the right was to a job that pays a livable wage. Now, here's the difference. You have under the Declaration of Independence the premise, the 6 principles of American government, that there is a God. God gives inalienable rights. Government exists to protect those rights of the first 3. Well, an inalienable right that the Founding Fathers identified is the right to earn a living. Every animal in nature, just by natural law itself, has a right to try to supply a living for itself, to try to get food for itself. If you're a squirrel, nobody regulates how many pecans you can get, how many acorns you can get. You have the right to do. And if you're creative and want to do something that no other squirrel does, you can do that. So you have a natural right to try to earn a living. Now, that does not translate that is a job. The right to earn a living is a lot more entrepreneurial. You have the right to try to take your skill set and do what you can with that skill set. That's not a job. A job is something that government identifies or recognizes or gives or takes away. The second thing is a livable wage. That's not a guarantee from God. You don't get a guarantee that you're going to get a certain wage. If you work hard, you might or might not be successful. Entrepreneurship sometimes works, sometimes fails. According to the Bible, if you work harder than others, you should get a higher wage than others. And if you don't work at all, you don't get any wage. Matter of fact, the Bible says they take away from you even that which you have. So a livable wage, that's not a God-given right. That's not an inalienable right. So what you have on the one hand, the monks are more in the venue of a God-given inalienable right, the right to pursue a living, the right to earn a living. FDR says we want you to have a job and we want you to have a livable wage. And by the way, who determines what's a livable wage?
Yeah, it sounds like the difference between pursuit of happiness and guarantee of happiness.
That's right.
Or redistribution of happiness.
Right. And that's the big difference. And that's why FDR has taken what should be individual initiative and turned it into a government. Here's what government will do for you. And that's a really big switch from what the founders set forth in the Declaration, is you have the right to try to go earn a living for yourself, and that is a natural right. Therefore, government will protect your right to earn a living, as in making caskets by monks. But the government doesn't guarantee you a job in making caskets, and it doesn't guarantee that you'll make a livable wage in making caskets. And that's what FDR was trying to do.
Isn't that really? I mean, it boils down to the basic difference between freedom, capitalism, and communism and tyranny. I mean, if you're going to guarantee everybody a job and a particular wage, you can only do that. I mean, economics is plain and simple. You can only do that if you bring everybody down to that level. The economy can't sustain doing it unless you make everybody equally miserable, versus freedom and capitalism, where you have the guarantee of the freedom to go out there and work hard and pursue that happiness, but it's not going to be guaranteed.
And that includes the freedom to fail. You know,
That's right.
If I develop a company that sells 200-pound life preservers on boats, that's not going to work. You jump in the water with a 200-pound life preserver, first, you can't even pick it up. Second, you'll sink. That's the freedom to fail. But I have the right to try to pursue a living. The government doesn't give that to me as a guaranteed right nor a livable wage.
Great question from Brenton. Appreciate it, man. And the rest of you, please send in your questions. Radio@wallbuilders.com is where you send them. Thanks for listening today to WallBuilders Live.